June 6, 1944. For nearly 5 years, Nazi Germany had dominated Europe. Country after country had fallen under its control, and from the Arctic Circle to the Mediterranean, Hitler's shadow stretched across the map. Entire nations lived under occupation. Families lived with constant fear. Resistance movements operated in secrecy, clinging to the hope that liberation would come someday. But liberation would not come through speeches or diplomacy. It would rather come through the greatest military gamble of the modern era, codenamed Operation Overlord. It was the Allied plan to break into Fortress Europe. The mission demanded something no army in history had ever attempted: crossing a stormy channel, fighting through heavily fortified defenses, and establishing a foothold on soil that the enemy was determined to defend at all costs. This was more than a battle, more than a military operation. It was a turning point in the destiny of the world. D-Day. To understand the invasion, we must return to the world that required it. By 1944, Europe was not a battlefield, it was a prison. Nazi Germany controlled France, Belgium, Norway, the Netherlands, Czechoslovakia, and much of Eastern Europe. Its armies had moved with terrifying speed and also enforced strict rule over millions. Along the Atlantic coast, Germany constructed a massive chain of defenses known as the Atlantic Wall. Concrete bunkers, anti-ship artillery, machine gun nests, minefields, and obstacles lined hundreds of miles of shoreline. German propaganda claimed no army could breach it. Meanwhile, the Soviet Union fought relentlessly on the Eastern Front, pushing against immense German forces. But the Allies needed a second front, a blow from the West, to prevent Germany from shifting even more troops eastward. And so the whispers of an invasion grew. Resistance networks carried news in fragments. Occupied citizens hoped the rumors were true. But hope alone would not defeat the Atlantic Wall. The Allies needed time, engineering, teamwork, and one of the greatest deception plans ever conceived. British intelligence, American strategists, and Allied codebreakers knew they had to mislead the German high command. They needed the enemy to expect an invasion somewhere else, anywhere else, except Normandy. This became Operation Fortitude, a deception so elaborate it seemed like fiction. Fake armies were created on maps. Inflatable tanks were placed in open fields. Actors posed as generals in public places. Fake radio chatter crackled across the airwaves. Double agents fed Germany carefully crafted false intelligence. Every message, every movement, every piece of fabricated evidence pointed to one place: Pas de Calais, the narrowest point of the English Channel. Hitler and many of his top commanders believed the deception. Even when D-Day began, some German leaders still assumed it was merely a diversion, a false landing before the real invasion. This hesitation would change everything. But deception alone couldn't win the war. The Allies still had to land on a defended shore, move thousands of vehicles across open beaches, and bring in food, ammunition, fuel, and reinforcements without a port. So engineers across the Allied world began solving problems that had never existed before. They built mulberry harbors, floating artificial ports designed to be assembled at sea. They invented specialized tanks, vehicles that could clear mines, crush obstacles and create pathways for infantry. They built new landing craft capable of carrying soldiers, tanks, and supplies directly onto the sand. Every tool required innovation. Every design required testing. Every failure had to be fixed quickly because the mission could not be delayed forever. And then there was the weather. In early June 1944, powerful storms swept across the channel. Waves crashed violently, winds howled, and visibility vanished. For a moment, the operation seemed doomed. But meteorologists found a small window, a brief break in the weather, and General Eisenhower made the most important decision of the war. The invasion would go forward. On June 6th, shortly after midnight, thousands of paratroopers from the U.S. 92nd and 101st Airborne Divisions, the British 6th Airborne Division, and other Allied units leapt into darkness. Many were dropped far from their intended landing zones. Some landed in flooded marshes. Others found themselves scattered across wide areas. The night was a field of confusion, but also opportunity. Despite being disoriented, airborne troops seized bridges, crossroads, and key positions. They disrupted German communication lines and blocked reinforcements from reaching the beaches quickly. Local resistance fighters carried out sabotage missions, cutting railway lines and sending coded messages. In the chaos, German commanders struggled to understand the scale of the assault. The night became a battlefield of shadows, and at dawn, the real invasion began. At 6:30 a.m., after hours of naval bombardment, the first landing craft touched the shores of Normandy. 5 beaches became the focus of history: Utah, Omaha, Gold, Juno, and Sword. At Utah Beach, U.S. forces drifted off course, but into a weaker German sector. Soldiers advanced inland more quickly than expected. At Omaha Beach, resistance was far stronger. High defenses, elevated positions, and challenging terrain slowed the assault. Casualties were heavy. But through determination, leadership, and incredible bravery, the troops pushed forward and broke through. At Gold, Juno, and Sword beaches, British and Canadian forces advanced steadily, securing towns, destroying strongpoints, and linking with airborne units. By nightfall, against staggering odds, all 5 beachheads were in Allied hands. The Atlantic Wall had been breached, and the liberation of Europe had officially begun. Yet D-Day was not the end. It was only the beginning. Normandy's countryside was treacherous. Dense hedgerows created natural barriers. Narrow roads slowed vehicles. German troops fought fiercely to delay the Allied advance. Progress was measured in miles, not days. Every village required strategy. Every field required caution. But with overwhelming air support, coordinated strategy, and the steady arrival of reinforcements, Allied forces pushed deeper into France. Then came Operation Cobra, a massive offensive that shattered German lines and opened the path to central France. By late August, Paris was liberated. People cheered in the streets. The French resistance rose openly. The world began to believe that victory in Europe was not just possible, but inevitable. D-Day succeeded not because of one advantage, but many. Air superiority that restricted German movement. Naval power that supported landings and disrupted defenses. Deception operations that misled the enemy. engineering innovations that solved impossible problems, international cooperation between allied nations, courage, discipline, and resilience from soldiers, sailors, air crews, engineers, and intelligence officers. D-Day was a victory built by thousands of people, each contributing to a moment that would transform the world. Today, the beaches of Normandy are quiet. The bunkers remain, weathered by time. The sand is peaceful. The waves roll in calmly. But beneath this tranquility lies a history that shaped the modern world. Operation Overlord shattered the myth of Nazi invincibility. It opened the Western path into Europe,